Jake Price heaven. So let's talk about handicap entries. Hi everybody, welcome back to the Jump Show. We're on episode 8 now of the 2024 Cheltenham Festival Ante-Post series. It's been great fun so far, and I'm sure will continue to be so for this episode too. Thank you very much for helping us reach 200 likes in the last episode. That was a really good landmark to get to. How about 250 this time? An even better landmark. And please do subscribe if you haven't already. As always, Jake Price and Dan Overall alongside me this week. Jake, this is probably like Christmas come early this day every year, isn't it? The release of the handicap entries. It's very much your bread and butter.
Yeah, it's the second best day of the year behind handicap weights, which is next Tuesday. So yeah, no, absolutely love this time of year. Love looking through all the handicaps today. And yeah, we'll get the weights next week and it'll be even more exciting.
Yeah, and if you don't follow Jake Price Racing on Twitter, please do, because it's been a bit of a Bible over the last 24 hours or so, finding out all those that have made the cut and those that haven't in the handicaps. Dan, how's it going, mate? I hope you're well, and hope the day job's going well. Everything's swimming in your life.
Well, my hopes and dreams have taken a bit of a dagger blow this weekend. So I've been a couple of days of quiet resentment towards everything that's gone wrong. But hey, we all knew this day was going to come. We'll get into it shortly, and all my thoughts and maybe somewhat anger will be revealed in due time. But other than that, swimmingly, can't complain. And also, who decided to organise Aintree national weights and handicap entries on the same day? Is that always the case, or is this just a weird year?
Like, very strange decision.
Yeah, I can't really figure that out. I mean, suddenly we go from days in midweek with having nothing to talk about, and then we've suddenly got the national and all the Cheltenham entries. Strange.
I don't know how much we really learned from the weekend's racing this week. We're going to review it, but in terms of Cheltenham, I don't think there's a huge amount other than possibly TULLYHILL winning and L'Homme not winning. But we'll start with the Reynoldstown Novice Chase at Ascot, which can be a pointer to decent horses going forward. But at the same time, in the past, because it's been run so close to the Cheltenham Festival, often you get the best 3 mile chases, novice chases, bypassing it. And I think that's what happened this year. I think, Jake, going into it, a lot of people thought Apple Away would take the beating, but she was fairly soundly beaten in the end.
She was, yeah. As you said, it's an interesting race. It's not full of top notches, is it? It's more of our handicappers and national hunt chase types. And I think that's kind of how it bore out at the finish, really. Henry's Friend obviously was a game winner. Ben Pauling immediately ruled out going to the national hunt chase and now is kind of having second thoughts on Nick Luck the other morning. So God knows what will happen with him. Kilbeg King is definitely going to the national hunt chase. They've booked Will Biddick, so he'll be aboard. He was a game second. I think he's a horse who's definitely got a handicap in him, even if he doesn't win the national hunt chase. I think I do quite like him. Off a mark of 142, I think he's still got some mileage in that. And then, yeah, as you said, Apple Away was in third. I don't think they've made a decision on where they're going to go yet. To be honest, I don't rate her as highly as some people seem to do. I definitely wasn't keen to take the 13 to 8 about her this weekend. But anyway, she ran okay. I'm sure they'll go for something like probably the national hunt chase, or I think that might suit her. But the horse actually that I thought that was really eye-catching in the race was the King of Ryoke as well. I know this is a Cheltenham show. He's going to be going to Aintree now. He's going to be running in the 3 mile handicap chase over there. And yeah, just watch back his run if you haven't already seen it. I think he is a horse that could be very well handicapped.
Okay, good stuff. I have to say, I was quite surprised by the victory of Henry's Friend, but Ben Pauling continues his relentless progress at the moment. Move on to the Grade 1 on Saturday. That was Pic D'Orgy's Ascot Chase. Very impressive performance. Definitely helped by the fact that he was given a kind of 6-length lead from the tape, Harry Cobden by his rivals. But it was still an exceptionally good ride at the top level, as we come to expect from him. Obviously, L'Homme a little bit disappointing. I mean, he jumped out left, didn't he, Dan, again? And, it was exactly the same as he did in the King George.
Yeah, just on the Reynoldstown, it reminded me that I backed Henry's Friend at 16 to 1 on Chase debut, and I think he's basically only just finished in time to run in the Reynoldstown. And I think that was a sign of things to come for my weekend, because I was just kind of sighing during the whole race because I knew what was going to happen after about 1 or 2 fences. And obviously, AP McCoy came out and said, "What the hell are they doing in giving Pictori such a lead?" And to be honest, I don't think Charlie Deutsch really had much chance because Lompresse was just never going a speed quick enough to get within shouting distance. I mean, the more questionable ride is what the hell were they doing on a Hoy Senior? Like that you drop him back to this trip, which he never really looked like he'd won, and then you ride him with such restraint. That didn't make sense to me. But I've had a fair few people talk to me about Lompresse and say, "Oh, what do you think?" and all that. And to be honest, I'm very pessimistic about his chances in the Gold Cup now. I can forgive being a bit lazy and a bit slow and a bit tentative at fences on his first run after so long and after an injury. Second time though, you do it. I mean, even on relatively quick ground, 2 mile 5. I think there have to be serious questions. You can't go that gallop in that kind of caliber of race in a 4-runner field. Serious question marks for me. Well, he's not going to have an issue staying, but I don't think he'll be within shouting distance for his stamina to take effect. Pretty disappointed, really. I think he's 14-1 for a Gold Cup. I mean, I backed him pre-Christmas, and I have absolutely very limited aspirations for that slip, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't blame you, really. I think, he is better left-handed. There's no doubt about that. And, that's I suppose you've got to take some semblance of comfort, but I agree with
Yeah,
you.
it's
You
not
would want to...
necessarily he jumps left, but it's more the fact he stuttered into so many fences that gets you.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I remember when he won the Brown Advisory, he won a Silly Isles. He's a strong travelling horse. Like he wasn't an off the bridle horse at all. He travelled really strongly. He was kind of in second or third in the Brown Advisory for most of the way, and just travelled and jumped his way into the lead so far out. And we just haven't seen that horse since his return. As I say, I was prepared to kind of give him an upgrade for the Fleur de Lis, but this one I was just like, maybe you're just not the same horse anymore.
Yeah, could well be. I'll stick with you, Dan, actually, for Mr. Policeman. Talking of going right-handed, he looked a lot better that way around, didn't he, on Sunday?
He did. It was obviously a bit of a lesser race than we've seen him in. And obviously, aspirations were very high going into the season. I guess he was kind of the dark horse for the Argyle, but not so much of a dark horse because I think every man and his dog had somehow cotton onto him, and he was such a short price going into the season. Had disappointed. I think the one annoying factor for me was him winning meant Safara went up £2 in Ireland, which was just unnecessary, really. I mean, he had him well beaten, and now I was quite happy with the mark of 143 in the UK, and I thought we had something to go to war with, and now he's probably going to get an extra couple of pounds from the British handicapper for staying in his box and not seeing him for 2 months. But look, fair enough performance from Mr. Policeman. I don't think he's in any handicaps over here. He's probably one of those for what's that grade A 2 mile 5 handicap at Punchestown, is it, that Willie Mullins tends to send a decent horse to?
With the top weight every year.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, he just seemed made for that, doesn't he, really, at this stage? I mean, he wants a bit further as well. He just seems a bit of a stayer.
Isn't that the one that Asturian Falange won?
Yeah.
I think it was also Adam McChosen run it as well. Did he run it on? Yeah. It's a similar. There's a theme developing.
Yeah. Yeah. And moving on to the most impressive performance, I would say, of the weekend, and that was backed up by you guys at home who voted it as the performance of the week. 55% of you saying Tullyhill was the best performer on the weekend. Could he be a supreme contender, Jake? I think he probably can be now in a race that is lacking a star. He might not be a star, but he did it really well, I thought.
Yeah, just when we were talking last week about knowing where Willie Mullins Novice Hurdlers are going to go, or thinking we do anyway, Tullyhill comes out of the woodwork and absolutely puts in a show, doesn't he? I've obviously had my admirations for this horse before. I've stated them on the podcast at the beginning of the season, that he was a horse that I really liked. And obviously when he made his debut over 2 mile 6, it was just like, what the hell was that? Like, he jumped like an absolute wardrobe, didn't really travel, didn't get home. It was just a nightmare. But he's been dropped back to 2 miles. Obviously, won his maiden nice and easily in January. And then coming here, I thought he was actually quite short before the race. I think, he went off 6-5 favourite. I thought that was quite a short price. I wasn't leaping to get involved with it, especially when we had, no flyers on him, Gigaro, some decent horses in the race. But he's absolutely torn them apart from the front. He's finally jumped with some kind of fluency. He's not absolutely perfect. You can stand back and go, wow, what a jumper. But he's improved drastically since his debut and even from his second start. So there's plenty to like in that regard. He put 9 lengths between himself and no flies on him / Gigaro, who was second and third, quite close together there. I mean, obviously he didn't get challenged from the front, but I don't think that's because any horse could get anywhere near him. He put on a really good time. Compares very favourably across the card, and I just think that he is definitely the type of horse that could force Ballyburn to go up to the Bearing Bingham now, because Paul Townend has his ride if he wants it in the Supreme on Tullyhill. So Tullihill's only got an entry in the Supreme. If Paul wants that ride, then it's looking like the Bearing Bingham would be for Ballyburn, wouldn't it? But we shall see on that regard. I think either way, Tullyhill will be turning up. Either way, I think he'll have a great chance off the front. I think he's improving. I think he'll continue to improve when we get to Cheltenham. And I just really like the horse. So I'm so glad to see him back. And also, he would have been my selection this week if he wasn't 4-1 for the Supreme now, which unfortunately is a little bit too short to be playing up on an Ante-Post series.
Yeah, a little bit skinny, isn't it? We also saw Salva win the Victoria Laura, maintaining his unbeaten record. Namir Lyon winning the Kingwell Hurdle at Wincanton. I was there actually alongside Kerry Lee to watch the race. She came and watched it with us, me and James Millman. That was really exciting, actually, because, of course, it was live and she was getting very, very excited.
I really like him.
Yeah, he's a
proper,
good horse.
honest, improving horse. Versatile. He's a proper honest
horse. Yeah, that seems to like every kind of ground, doesn't he, as well? And afterwards, Kerry has said that he's got entries at Cheltenham, but he's more likely to go for the entry Grade 1 over 2 miles 4. Yeah. So
makes sense.
It does make sense. I don't think we'll see Constitution Hill going that way this year, personally. I think if they're going to go anywhere, they'll probably go to Punchestown over 2, just because last year, everyone's always said if he had a kind of chink in his armour, it was going to be exploited, or at least it looked like it might be exploited to a tiny extent at Aintree, didn't it, rather than anywhere else. But yeah, I think it's a race that will suit him well. He gets a nice break, of course, between now and then. Botox has winning the Rendlesham as well. He's just a tough old horse, isn't he, Jake?
Yeah, good victory. He was the highest rated horse going into it. I think he had a small penalty to give away, but very easy winner. Very impressive. Would he go to Cheltenham? I don't know. But he's probably more of an Aintree type anyway, isn't he?
Yeah, I think so. In the same colours, we saw Nasalam released the announcement was released. It's going to be he's going to be skipping the Gold Cup in favour of the Grand National. Unsurprising, really, I would say. No flies on him. Dan, not running at Cheltenham. Sorry, mate.
Yeah, now I've got a story to tell here because this annoyed me. So let's go back a few weeks now. So he was on track for the DRF 2 weeks out. All was rosy in the world. He's going. He was second favourite Ante-Post for that race, by the way. He was back from 14s into 6s. He was clear second favourite ahead of Stayed Still going into the Ante-Post market. Then a week before the race, the final confirmations are out. He's nowhere to be seen. Strange. Eddie O'Grady comes out afterwards and says, oh, no, he's all fine. We'll just change your target. Okay, right. Interesting. Hadn't considered this Punchestown race, but okay, go there. Assume all is well. Nothing else was mentioned. A few days before the race, Frank Berry does an interview. Oh, yeah, I think he's going to go there. Yeah, he's had a bit of a hiccup. All right, okay, so he's been bollocks then for a few weeks, has he? Well, yeah, great, okay. So now we're getting the real story. But okay, he's declared, so he's running. Must be okay. Open 6-4. You're thinking, yeah, well, he looked very impressive. Tullyhill, had one good performance before then, but before that was a bit of a disaster. Fair enough. Come the off, he's 9-2, and I don't think anyone had ever backed him. And I think he'd lost 2 legs and his head based on the market. And he ran like a horse who'd missed work because he travelled really well, blew up, made an error, and then stayed on again. It was just clearly he had missed time. And it's just the mixed messages just always doing my head in. Like, it was just clearly a horse who was not fit. I knew, I think I tried to cash out before Tullyhill even finished got to the line, because you could just see he was going to finish second or third. And luckily, because we had him at 33s, I hope some people did likewise. He only drifted out to about the same price. I got pretty much all my stake back because we were on early. But just annoys me because there's such the mixed messages. It's just a run of a horse who clearly had missed time. They're going to stick to domestic campaigns. I still think there's a really good horse there because he travelled strongly throughout that race. He would have learned a hell of a lot for it. I think he'll make a really nice chaser. But just the mixed signs and the mixed messages, so many red flags, just annoyed me. On a weekend where I'd already been blown a bit hurt by Lompresse, I didn't need that second blow. So it was just a compounding woes kind of weekend.
Yeah, it's a story to make anyone cry, that one, Dan. So I'm really sorry, mate. It's been except you're laughing and have been for days. Don't you try and fake sympathy with me. I know you were sitting there laughing your head off. And the thing is, we just knew the first non-runner was always going to be me. It's always me.
But would I change it for the world? No. I know my place.
Do you know what, mate? I know that we laugh about this kind of thing because it's a bit Schadenfreude, isn't it? But I genuinely, when I saw that news, I was very disappointed for you because at the end of the day, we want in an ideal world every single one of our Ante-Post tips to be a runner, don't we? That's what you do it for. So
I have
I
WhatsApp
hope
messages from you pointing to the contrary. Don't you try and act all like, oh, really sorry, mate, on air. The people, trust me, he's been giving it out mainly because I think he's still a bit sore after Hitman Gate
yeah,
last
that is
week. So,
literally that
Yeah.
why. That is why.
so don't you try and act all innocent.
I couldn't take that lying down. Do you know what? I had a slight blow myself today because I was going to, up until 2 hours before the podcast, put up "Let It Rain" for the champion bumper.
Hey.
And then, then Dan Skelton came out and said she won't run. She's had a little bit of a setback, nothing too major, but she's not going to run again this season. I think she would have I think she would have had a major chance in soft ground. She's a very, very smart mare. You have to watch that race she won at Ascot, which was a really strong race. It was probably the strongest bumper run in this country this season, and
Definitely.
she's absolutely thrashed them. And with Bretchen Castle, whatever the name of the horse is, Ben Progas's horse in second,
Yep.
and then a Celtic Dino back in third. That looked a really strong race, and she did win it very well. So yeah, she'll be one to watch out for next year for sure. Okay, now we're on to Jake Price Heaven. So let's talk about handicap entries. Go on, Jake. There are plenty of prominent horses who haven't got an entry in some of these big races.
Yeah, so that was the main gist of my tweets today. I was just looking at the horses that were prominent in the markets beforehand that didn't end up getting an entry in their races. So I'm not going to go through each one obviously because we've got time constraints here, but just a couple that come off the top of my head here. Iberico Law didn't get any entries in the Coral Cup or Martin Pipe, so he's just going for the county now. Same with Zenta. She's in the exact same position in regard to that. Some horses in the Ultimate that weren't entered, like some Marla Mission, Desamore House, Panda Boy was an interesting one. I've seen a few people like Johnny Deneen putting up. Nasalam, obviously, as we mentioned earlier, and then Broadway Boy was another one who hasn't got a handicap entry. I think the main race that was blown apart a little bit was the Plate. Hartwood, I Know the Way You're Thinking, So Scottish, and Mr. Policeman were all 8-1, front of the market as of this morning, and then didn't get an entry in the race. So the Plate is definitely one where the market's turned a bit upside down, and we'll talk about our selections in a bit. But the other ones to note were in the Martin Pipe as well. Mr. Giff was a horse that was right at the front of both that and the county markets. He hasn't been entered because he would have needed another run anyway, but he didn't get an entry. Lecky Watson in the same camp as that. So there's plenty of horses. King of Kingsfield is another one that people thought might go to the Pipe. It's not got that entry. He's only got the county as an option. So plenty of horses that didn't get entered. You can obviously, I'll put a link in the description so you can go check out the tweet if you want to see them all.
I assume Mr. Giff or Mr. Giff is going to go for the Supreme then. Is that the plan now, Jake?
I think so,
Also,
yeah. And I wouldn't say he doesn't have a chance, to be honest. I thought he was electric on his hurdles debut, but yeah, it'd be interesting to see who turns up. If there's no Ballyburn, I might have a little each way on him, to be honest. But yeah, he's a very interesting horse.
Yeah, no, he certainly is. How are we doing then, lads, on our horses that have been put up in our Ante-Post series so far, handicap-wise? Dan, are we still going?
I think everyone's in. I think everyone's currently in anyway. So that's part one. Done. Now we wait for the weights, and then we wait for the defections. I've
exactly.
done this too many. The only thing I would say is Safra is obviously in the Grand Annual and the Plate. I am getting a bit anxious because the Grand Annual looks very weak, and Gordon maybe could have St. Felicien who goes to the Plate instead of him. I still think Safra's best chance would be the Plate because I think he wants to step up in trip. But I think as of today, I also back Safra for the Grand Annual at 16-1, number and no bet, because I just want to have him covered for both races. And that Grand Annual to me looks very winnable.
Yeah, you're a sensible man, that's for sure. Also, Jake, it was nice to see Favour and Fortune, a little bit of a write-up there from Alan King saying he isn't in the Supreme. He won't go for that, Willie. If he's got, we know Alan King is a sensible man. He's got half a brain. He's not going to go for the Supreme, is he? He's going to go for the county, a race which he could well finish very close in. Yeah,
he said he liked the mark of 138, didn't he, in that write-up on the Racing Post today. So yeah, sounds like the county would probably be his option. As like Dan, mine are all entered, so happy days in that regard. Two I did want to quickly mention was Krabilly, because obviously, as I've just mentioned, with the Plate being decimated, Krabilly was now 16th into about 10s. I think he's 14th in a place if you're quick. I don't know if that will obviously still be up when we put the video up, but I think he's got an unbelievable chance now. I think he's JP's probably number one prospect for the race. Off the mark of 140, only got per pound from my case last week. So I was expecting 3, 4, maybe 5 maximum. He got £1. Like, I think he's ridiculously well handicapped off 140. So I think I can see him going off probably favourite, if not very near on the day anyway. And the other one was Percival Legalwa. He only got an entry in the Kinmure. He didn't get one in any other race. So it looks like that's going to be the target, unless obviously they stay in Ireland, which would be absolutely gutting at this point. But he's seen plenty of money as well.
Mate, you're allowed to rub your hands in glee. Go on, I'll let you do
Well, fingers crossed he goes to the race. And obviously Derek O'Connor would be on, because again, he would be JP's number one in the race. So yeah, we're in good positions with those two, and let's just hope that they actually make the races.
Yeah, definitely. Dan, is there anything that you kind of caught your eye in the handicap entries?
There's so many. I think a lot of the work we're going to be doing is going to be leading on to next week. And Tom, let us know, like, what reveal to the audience what we'll be doing next week. Instead of our usual episode, we'll be doing something a little bit different.
Yeah, absolutely. Next Tuesday on the 27th, 7 o'clock in the evening, on our YouTube channel, we are going to be doing a handicap weights live stream. So make sure to join us. And Jake, it's probably going to be about an hour or so talking through all the weights that are released on that day in the afternoon, right?
Yeah, we'll probably just take it race by race, chat through our thoughts on the marks that have been given out, talk about some of the gambles that have been going on through the day of, the horses that have been well backed, and just get the chat's opinion of what you guys think of each horse, each race. And yeah, we'll just have some discussion and talk about all the weights.
Yeah, and I have a bet lined up for that stream as well.
Oh, there we
go. Yeah. I'm just hoping his price holds. But Jake is one I've been on to Jake for a few weeks now, and I wasn't sure he was going to get entry because I haven't seen him for a little bit. But he only has one entry, and it's the race I hope for. So I'm quietly confident on this one.
I thought your bet was going to be my internet connection to go down at least 5 times in that stream, because it's probably what's going to happen.
7.
Yeah, good point. And the other thing I wanted to say about that, actually, in terms of the handicap entries today, was that, Jake, we got the last Potemps qualifiers this weekend, haven't we? And I did notice the entrant that really caught my eye was Montmoral in the Potemps, because he's got that entry this weekend, and he's been very lightly campaigned over fences. I think he's a fascinating runner if they decide to go that route back over hurdles.
Yeah, he could be interesting. Obviously, he has to get qualified at Chepstow on Saturday. Another interesting horse in that race actually is Walking on Air as well. It seems like Nicky Henderson's drawn stumps on his chasing career for now, and is going to go back over hurdles with him. So that would be interesting. He ran well in the Potemps last year. But there's also one in Ireland, Nace on Sunday as well. Gordon Elliott has entered an absolute battalion of horses in the race. He's got the likes of Cletus Poulor, very interesting, unexposed horse. Will Do, similar type. He's also put Maxim in there, obviously absolutely bolted up at the DRF. He would be interesting. The Tide Turns is another one who's come back from the dead seemingly to get an entry here. But perhaps the most interesting entry of all of them is Good Time Johnny, who is currently the favourite for the Kinmure on a lot of boards. But he's been entered in the Potemps qualifier on Sunday. He's been entered in the Potemps final at Cheltenham as well. Perhaps they're getting second thoughts on chasing. I don't know. Obviously, what AJ Martin isn't an absolute bonkers man by all accounts. So we shall see what happens. But if he did defect, then obviously that would just help Percival Legalwa's case, wouldn't it? So we shall see.
He can't jump a fence from what we've seen.
Exactly.
I see people tipping him for the Kinmure. He can't jump. I mean, maybe it'd be the best. But the thing is, we always get one of these horses in the Kinmure, generally like, oh yeah, no, he's like generally have solid Cheltenham form, unexposed, look like they've been prepped for one race, but they generally just can't jump, and it happens year after year, and they end up out the back of the telly. So I was hoping he'd go to the Kinmure just so I could take him on, but maybe they've actually realised he just can't jump a fence.
Okay, so we're on to the main event, which is, as always, our latest Ante-Post bets for the Cheltenham Festival. I'm going to go first because I'm currently one behind in terms of numbers. So Dan and Jake have currently got one more selection. So I'm going to catch up this week with 2. And they're both coming in handicap. So far, I've only done 1 in a handicap. That was Favour and Fortune. And this week, I'm going to do 2. And the first one comes in the Coral Cup and is a 40-to-1 shot. Can you believe it? It's a horse. I'm so scared of saying who it is now because of the reaction I'm going to get.
Here we go.
It's fine. Yeah, it is. Drum roll. Mark of Gold for Gary Moore. Look, he's a 40-1 shot, pretty much because of the fact that this season hasn't really gone to plan for him. But I wouldn't read too much into that. So he's had 3 starts so far this campaign. The first being at Ascot on his reappearance, which I think he needed. And then he went to Kempton over December. And to be honest, he did run quite poorly. But I think what they had in mind was a crack at the Lanzarote, because he was very, very impressive in February last year at Kempton, winning by 14 lengths off a mark of 129 handicap company. And I think they probably looked at that Lanzarote as a race that was a very similar kind of race over exactly the same course and distance. And off the mark of 136, which he was given, I think they probably thought, you know what, this is actually a really good opportunity for him. And I have to say, I'm sure they were absolutely fuming that he fell 4 out, because although it was still quite early on in the race in terms of what was going to happen, I did think that he was back to his best in terms of the way that he travelled. He was really going strongly. He was jumping well. And I think generally he looks like he was going to play a hand in the finish. He was quite a big price that day, but I think he looked like he was back to his best. With that in mind, he's off the same mark now because he fell that day. So it's a mark of 136. Now, he ran the Martin Pipe last year and finished behind Iroko. And that was a pretty decent run. He was only beaten into 7th, beaten 6 1/4 lengths. And he was only 6 years old last year. He's a year older this year. And Caelan Quinn rode him that day in the Martin Pipe. Now, Caelan Quinn at the time was a 5-pound claim. Yes, he's a good claimer, good conditional. But, you know, he's got a year on his back now. He's much more experienced. I'm not sure the ride that he gave Mark of Gold was one from which that he could ever really win that race. He was always on sort of the playing catch up on the back foot. Now, I think, given that he still ran pretty well in that race and it was on soft ground, I'd be keen on him switch to a sounder surface. I think he's a much better horse on good ground or better. He has won on heavy, on the flat, so he clearly handles both. But I think he's a much more potent performer when the ground's on the quicker side. So with that in mind, I'm hoping that will be the case at Cheltenham. And if it is, I can see him travelling much more smoothly into it and being very much closer up. He's also £3 lower than that run in the Martin Pipe last year. So he's handicapped to run a really big race. He's got another year on his back. He's more mature. I think he was going to be there, bang there or thereabouts in the Lanzarote last time. And he's off the same mark now. So at 40-1, I'm keen on Mark of Gold, who should get into the race. He's on off mark 136. That should be fine to get into the race. So towards the bottom of the weights, I'd hope Mark of Gold should be a big player for me. I think 40-1 is a decent price. So he's my first handicap selection for Gary Moore in the Coral Cup.
And he's only in the Coral Cup. He's not in the Pipe.
He's only in the Coral Cup, yeah.
Huh. Okay, interesting. They didn't go for both. No,
yeah,
fair enough. Interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
I wouldn't know why that is, but maybe they just think the Coral Cup is going to be his race.
yeah. That race is always there for the taking. Really easy race to win.
Thanks, mate. Go on then, Dan. Looking forward to hearing your your reasoning behind this one.
Yeah. I think this may get a few pelters, but look, you two have already gone for the Turners, and Jake's argument about he made last week about basically the race there's a high chance to cut up quite a lot. It rings still true to this day. And while your two in Facile Vega and Ginny's Destiny have winning chances, maybe my one's winning chances are somewhat negligible. He's a big price, but I think when you're looking at the race, I think there's a very real chance we get 6 or 7 runners in the Turners this year. When you've got the likes of Factafile or Grey Dawning seemingly more likely to go to the Brown Advisory, Factafile seemingly definitely so, Grey Dawning more likely. Founder 50, Alette Thompson at the head towards the top of the market. They'll both be in the Arkle. American Mike, Irish National, I would say. Iroko, I think a horse I love. People know I love this horse, but he's so short. It'd be one of the all-time great performances and training performances to get him to win a Grade 1 on his second chase start after he was ruled out for the season just a few months ago. So I think it's
one of the worst prices I've ever seen Iroko in that race. Like, how is he that short?
It's an indictment of how the race is panning out that he's that price, because people are just latching on to something they think is going to run. And he has potential, so I get it. But I mean, yeah, the price for me was just be an absolute no-go. So I think, given obviously you're getting free places Ante-Post, and normally I wouldn't be a massive fan of each way Ante-Post bets, but I think this market is shaping up for one. And so the horse I'm going to go for is Jello for Venetia Williams, who obviously is in sparkling form. And obviously, I'm really impressed with Lompresse recently. So obviously, that's a massive positive. But look, he's an interesting horse in his own right. Like, he showed a fair bit of promise over hurdles when he came over from France. He bolted up on his debut, and it looked like he could be quite decent. It just didn't really kick on from there. But unsurprisingly, given connections, he's just taken his game to a whole new level over fences. One on his chase debut where he beat Master Chewy, who was banging form, race fit. That was over 2 miles at Aintree, and what turned into a fairly stamina-filled race because 6 of the 12 fences were doled off, and it became quite a grueling test. But he persevered really well on that occasion. Obviously, Master Chewy's been second to Elixir de Nuts in the meantime. He won a Grade 2, beating Nickelback. So he's proven that to be a fair level of form, given what he did, and they pulled Marska with the 3rd and 4th. So it was a really good chase debut. Then went to Newbury, where he easily won off 135. Then went to Ascot for the Grade 2 of a 2 mile 3 furlongs. It wasn't the best renewal by any stretch of the imagination. Can Do Kid was in second. Was a horse I like, but isn't really necessarily up to that level over 2 mile 3. But jumped really well from the front. He's kind of pictoriesque to a certain extent. Nothing really got within a striking distance of him. Looked really good to my eye. And then he went to Lingfield for the 2 mile race, which JPR1 eventually prevailed in. And if you remember, he got absolutely taken out at the first fence, and that was that. I mean, it seems almost unfair that he has a fall by his name, because it was just kind of a bit of a mess of an incident with Matata jumping so violently out to his left. So you can't really blame him for that. Turned out fairly quickly after that to go in the Scilly Isles. Now, the build up to that race, I mean, I think I previewed it, a fair few people have previewed it. It was the massive focus was that I think 4 of the 5 were all front runners, Jello included. So it was pretty surprising when Nickelback was basically the only one to go on, and everything else was kind of cautious about trading with Nickelback, Jello included, who was ridden with extreme restraint by Charlie Deutsch. Was previously proved pretty adept at going forward as a very accurate and nimble jumper who likes an aggressive ride. But despite him being ridden fairly tamely, I thought he shaped really promisingly. And I think in the end, he was given an impossible task to peg back Nickelback, who just did what Nickelback does. And he was away and gone, jumped every fence, and on quick ground was never really going to come back to him. But Jello snuck into that from off the pace, and he was basically upside Hermes Allen, and that, I think, was going to get the better of that argument when Hermes Allen obviously tragically lost his life at the second fence. But I think if all was being well, I think Jello would have got up to be a clear second, and he stayed on only to be beaten 7 lengths on that occasion. Obviously, you can upgrade that run for a variety of reasons. Obviously, the ride, the way the race just panned out in general, the yard form has obviously been poor. That doesn't need to be advertised much more. So, given the circumstances, I thought that was a really decent effort. Now, he's in the Arkle as well, which looks open, but I would be surprised unless it was really soft ground if they went back to 2 miles. He's already shown plenty of stamina like he did at Ascot. Charlie Deutsch said after that race that he got a little outpaced over 2 miles on the previous occasion. There's plenty of stamina in his pedigree, and he felt that kind of intermediate trip was where he was in his comfort zone. He was kind of able to cruise along at a decent speed, but utilize the speed he does have while also showing his stamina. So I think this is going to be his trip. And look, he's going to have to improve to win. There's no doubt about it. But he's run consistently to a very decent level over fences. Like, he hasn't really done anything wrong. I think they'll be adapting more positive tactics next time out, hopefully. I think that'll show him to a better effect. And Lompresse didn't have a dissimilar profile going into his novice chase campaign. They both started their chase careers off a mark 128 and really kicked on. And I say, bearing in mind, this is likely to be a small field, and the last 3 runnings of the turners have been 8 runners, 4 runners, and 7 runners. I think currently with 33 to 1 each way, that's without non-Renault bet, because I'm taking the chance he goes here instead of the Arkle. I think that's a decent price. I can definitely see him placing. And if he can improve and a couple of the other more prominent ones disappoints, it wouldn't be 1,000,000 to 1 that he could win this. It would be a poor renewal, no doubt. But I can definitely see him running a big race at a big price.
Hopefully he won't be a spoiler taking on Ginny's Destiny for the lead then.
Well, I don't think it would lead. I just think it'll be more prominent than last time, because he was really anchored out the back at Sandown. Just prominent would do me. Ginny can have the lead.
He's one of those horses that actually not really everything's gone right from the last couple of starts. Like, he definitely hasn't shown what he can do.
No. He's had massive excuses for his 2 like blemishes. He's had plenty of excuses for. I think 33 to 1, I do think is a reasonable each way price.
Okay. In the words of Dan Overall, I don't hate it.
Oh, thank you. That fills me with confidence.
Okay, Jake, over to you for this week.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a transition week, obviously, because we've had the entries in, but just because you've got the entry doesn't mean you necessarily can find your bets. So For me, in terms of timings, I've managed to find one that I think is a big price now and is probably going to be backed in quite a bit before the off, especially if it actually runs in this race, where the options are still open. But I'm going back to the Ultimas. Now, I've already had, obviously, Chianti Classico. We're in a great position there, 20-1 into about 10s and 8s in places. Very happy with that. Not got a problem with the horse whatsoever. Tim Bailey's come out today and said that it's the target. So we're happy in all of that regard. It's just that I think I found a horse in the market that I want to cover alongside. So whilst I've had a full bet on Chianti Classico, I'm probably going to have a half bet on this horse. And this horse is Giovinco for Lucinda Russell. Now, the reason why I'm putting him up here is because he obviously still has his entries in the Brown Advisory and the Turners, but he only got a handicap entry in the Ultima. And I think connections were basically running him the other day at Newcastle, which I'll come on to in a minute, with the view of trying to find out where they want to run him. And the fact that they've then gone and entered him in the Ultima suggests to me that this is probably going to be where they end up. But obviously that remains to be seen. Plans can change. The price is 16-1 non-runner, no bet. So I'm happy to take that chance, and we'll, he, as Tom, I think you said off camera a minute ago, like he's the type of horse that people will really latch onto because he was spoken about in, Grade 1 glowing terms at the beginning of the season. Even during the season, he's been aimed at these Grade 1 races. So I think he's definitely a horse who's got mileage off the mark of 146. And if he did turn up in this handicap, I think he would have a good chance. So if I just talk about his profile a tiny bit, obviously I'm not going to go into massive detail. Most people will know the horse quite well. Obviously unseated on his chase debut at Carlisle when looking like he could challenge. Then after that went to Aintree, won a bit of it was kind of a race where they took out a lot of the fences, wasn't it? So what you can take from it, I don't really know exactly, but he was top weight, 143, and he was, the easiest winner you could ask for. So that was good. He then went to Sandown. I think this is his most important run, really. He went to Sandown for the Escher Novices Chase, a Grade 2, over 3 miles, and obviously he took on the Stay Away Faye that day. And I think a lot of people, when they watched it at first, kind of thought that Giovinco should have gone on to win it. And obviously, we've learned a lot about Stay Away Faye across the season, and what he always does is, to hit a bit of a flat spot and then stay on strongly at the finish. So perhaps that, exaggerated the look that it gave, but he, Stay Away Faye went on to beat Giovinco by 1.5 lengths that day. I thought it was a good performance from Stay Away Faye. He's very much on my Brown Advisory radar as potentially the one that I'll end up landing on the day. And Giovinco obviously running very, very close. Was guessing £3 at the weights, but it was still a very good performance considering that horse is now rated 159. So that's where you're getting, the mileage on his mark of 146 realistically. He then went to Kempton, obviously over Christmas, ran in the Grade 1. Pretty disappointing. I think that connections kind of put it down to Kempton not being his track. I understand that. Going back to Cheltenham, I think would be a track that he'll enjoy a bit more than that. But, realistically, it was disappointing. But I think what I've liked since that is that they've put him away. He's had a break of 51 days, and they've just brought him out last week in a really small two-runner novice chase at Newcastle. And obviously, it's limited handicap chase it was, so he was having to give the weight away. And he's beat Choose the News by 4 lengths, just absolutely on the bridle, coasting round over 2.5 miles. I think that's perfect in terms of having a spin to, shake off that pulled-up effort over Christmas. He's going to be aimed at the Cheltenham Festival. That's obviously always been what they've aiming him for. I hope that they go for the Ultima. I think they have a great chance here. Obviously, as I said, it's a non-runner, no bet. So, we'll just get our money back if he doesn't turn up here. But I think he'd have a great chance. I think he still could end up being a Grade 1 chaser down the line. He's got a very similar profile to Corrick Rambler, realistically, going into the Ultima for his first season anyway. And yeah, off 146, I think he'd have a great chance.
Fair enough. Make a good case there, Jake. And I get the feeling there will be at some stage a big race in Giovinco. I don't necessarily think that the campaign he's been given this season has been the wisest. But that said, I still think he is not been kind of hardened up enough. So I think there's still room for a big race in him this season.
I think they've campaigned him like he is definitely a Grade 1 animal, whereas we don't technically know that he definitely is yet. But because of that, he's now got good experience, as you say, and he's got potential in his mark for going back to handicaps. So yeah, I think he'd have a live chance if he turned up here.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. And I think 16-1 is a good price too. Okay, before we finish, I'm going to do my other Ante-Post bet because I'm going to do 2 this week, and this one comes in the Grand Annual handicap chase, and is a horse I have to say that I've been a fan of for most of the season because I'm actually convinced there is a really big race in this horse off his current mark. Like, I think he's really well handicapped. He's just a bit of a, I don't know, he just doesn't always put it all together, but there is definitely a race in him. And I think I put him up actually earlier in the season in November, December time. And
I know
that
exactly
is,
who you're talking about now.
yeah, you know what I talk about. Yeah. I'm surprised Dan doesn't sound enthusiastic. It's Frere Dame for Dan Skelton and Harry Skelton too. Now they've also got Calico entered in the race and Unexpected Party too. I think Calico, who
And
is
Pembroke.
bound if you and Pembroke, sorry, Pembroke as well, yeah. Calico is bound to run his race, but I think the handicap has got him at the moment for mark 143. He might well finish second or third, but I'd be concerned about him winning. Unexpected Party is Unexpected Party. He's been pretty woeful the last few runs and just seems to be one of those disappointing horses, doesn't he, really? And Pembroke, I'd be a little bit concerned about his jumping sometimes. And for all that, he's a novice improving, but I'm keener on Frere Dame. And I will run through the reasons why. So he looked a pretty exciting chaser when he first started over fences in the end of the season 2022, when he won both his starts very easily at Kempton and Newbury. Then he went and had a long break until April time, finished second in a decent race at Ascot behind Black Jerry when sent off favourite. Again, he was sent off favourite at the Scottish National meeting and didn't run any sort of race. He made a very bad mistake 4 out, and that kind of cost him any chance in that. He then had a long break again until November this season, where he finished amazingly enough, 14 lengths behind Boot Hill in 5th, having travelled like the best horse in the race. It was soft ground that day. He doesn't really want soft ground, and I think he probably needed the run because it was his first start back. And that was when I was really keen on him to win at Ascot the next time in a very similar sort of race, where he actually finished half a length behind Boot Hill. Now, this, I think, is the most pertinent run as to his chance in the Grand Annual, because if you watch that back on the 25th of November, he made an absolutely shocking mistake at 3 out, just before they came to the home straight. And it basically knocked him back from a position where he was about to travel into sort of third, second place, back to the back of the pack, which meant he had to make ground again all the way around the field. And in the end, he actually only finished half a length off Boot Hill, which I thought was a cracking run in the circumstances. And that was off a mark of 133. He is off the same mark still. That's thanks to 2 runs after that, which I'll come to now, both of which were over 2.5, an extended 2.5 miles. I don't think they've suited stepping him up and trip. I can understand why they thought they should do it, because that run at Ascot suggested, they might give it a go. He was staying on the outside, but I think a strongly run 2 miles is exactly what he wants. I think the soft ground caught him out of Musselburgh in January on New Year's Day. He was sent off favourite that day, unsurprisingly, off just a pound higher than that run at Ascot, but I think he just didn't want that soft ground. And then last time at Cheltenham, it was a strange run on Trials Day because he never really seemed to be travelling. They tried cheek pieces for the first time with the tongue tie, and I don't think it really worked. And he never seemed to go at all from the word go. He looked uncomfortable. And I imagine they'll discard the headgear for the Grand Annual this time. So dropping back to 2 miles on a sound surface off his current handicap mark, I'm just convinced there is a nice race in him of 133. Hopefully he'll get in. He needs a few to come out before, but 133 might sneak him into the bottom of the weight, which would leave him very well handicapped in my view. And back over the 2 mile trip, I can see him really thriving off a strong pace and travelling into it really nicely. And hopefully he can find enough in the finish. It's sometimes been an issue with him, but for example, on that November run at Ascot, he definitely did find. So I'm hoping he'd be on a going day, but I do think I'm just absolutely convinced he's well treated. So he'd be my pick in the Grand Annual at this stage, and hopefully he's the pick of Harry Skelton too. We shall see. It's his only entry at Cheltenham, so fingers crossed he does go for the race, and fingers crossed he gets in too. So Frere Dame for me in the Grand Annual. Okay, guys, that brings us to the end of the show, and an enjoyable one too. I've probably talked too much about my selections, but there you go. These things happen. And please do remember to like and subscribe to our video. It really helps us out. And remember, next week, Tuesday, live stream, 7 o'clock on Tuesday. Do not miss it. Until then, it's goodbye.